All right, welcome back, everyone. It is LaughNgamez here. I'm back with another Starcraft 2 1 versus 1 replay cast. It should be a good one here, and I'm excited to get on into it. We're going to be having some Korean on Korean action, so that generally means it's going to be a pretty darn good game of Starcraft 2. We've got ourselves a Terran versus Protoss. And yeah, let's just jump right on into this one. The map is Turbo Cruise, and spawning down the bottom left-hand side of the map, playing for the Jin Air Green Wings, it's Trap. Trap, probably one of the most underrated players out there. I mean, he might be still. For those of you unaware, Trap is, he's a player who's been very consistent, but hasn't necessarily gained, like, I guess, a lot of super recognition or anything as far as, like, as far as just his results and skill goes. I mean, he's had a little bit more lately. I think he made, like, a GSL Finals or something like that. And then, I mean, I say that like it's no big deal. That is a big deal. But, I mean, as he has more and more good results, people are starting to sort of warm up to Trap a little bit. His opponent, though, I don't even know if I really need to introduce this guy, because if you followed StarCraft for like the past 10, 20 years, something like that, I mean, he's been around a long time. It's FanTaSy. FanTaSy, one of the oldest StarCraft 2 pro gamers out there that plays at a competitive level. There's plenty of old people who play StarCraft 2, believe it or not, but not all of them at like a GSL Code S level. Taking a look here, we do have FanTaSy. He proxied his barracks outside of his base here, and basically Trap is going to be like, where's that barracks? What's going on? Don't you know the meta's changed? Terrans generally build their barracks in their base these days. Now, the thing is, it's probably just, he can probably just assume that it's built right behind there or something like that. And as a matter of fact, I mean, he did kind of see the SCV go right by it, didn't he? Maybe he missed that anyway. He's not fully aware of what's coming his way proxy-wise, and as a result, we have seen a Cybernetics core first for Trap here, dumping a Chrono Boost into that Stalker, and the Reaper's just at home. So a nice little opening here for FanTaSy, and then to really add the icing on top of the cake, he's just adding a bunker right next to this command center. Guys, I gotta say, I love this meta from Terran. I mean, Terrans are pretty much just tossing up bunkers super willingly these days, and that's just because it defends from basically any early aggression that's coming your way from a Protoss player. Just the weight a bunker has in the early game of StarCraft 2, it's huge. Like, they're just so strong. You just can't get through them. No matter how much a Stalker may try, or a Zealot, or an Adept, or just a small group of units, a bunker, maybe with a little bit of SCV love for repair, it's just going to be fine. And now, looking at this game, as things are progressing here, it's just FanTaSy getting up his Nexus, or his command center, Nexus for Trap. And yeah, pretty normal stuff going on right now. Reaper's just doing its thing, just going around scouting out for FanTaSy. I mean, it's pretty tough to actually get into your opponent's base on the map Turbo Cruise. So, yeah, it's pretty tough to do. So, I mean, FanTaSy just scouting all around. He's got his Reaper. It's going to jump up there into those cliffs. I guess they can just jump up here, but Trap's doing a good job shutting it down. And so that Reaper, it does escape into FanTaSy's side of the map, but he's not really out there scouting. Cyclone is on the way here for FanTaSy, so he's going to be having that defensive tool, which is incredibly powerful, good at shutting down basically anything in the early game. So we're seeing a trend here for the way FanTaSy's playing this game. He's going to go to Cyclone. That's really good at shutting down just like the odd unit here and there, like say an Oracle, or say a Stalker that wanders out too far on the map. And then the bunker also just shutting that down. So I'm liking the way FanTaSy's playing this game, just being safe, not cutting any corners or anything to an extreme degree here. Meanwhile, though, Trap just doing his thing. It's not like anything too significant has happened in this game. So we're seeing Blink on the way, a Robo on the way. If I had to guess, it's going to be Blink into Colossus. Trap is one of the guys who makes a style like this just look absolutely broken, because he's just going to get Colossus, he's going to use Blink Stalkers, he's probably going to shut down most aggression that comes his way. That's generally what you can expect. We'll see if that is the case or not, because of course FanTaSy is going to be trying to make something happen at some point. Looking at this though, pretty standard stuff going on right now. Ooh, that Adept actually did complete it. Shane, whoa, this Adept makes it into the main base of FanTaSy. I wasn't even really looking at it. I just checked the initial shade, but no, a full scout out goes off. That Adept did commit its life, and oh, okay, look at that. Barracks swapping over to that starport, so that is kind of notable there. Gonna be Nothing else besides that Raven coming out of there. And no, this is interesting what's going on in this game. Of course, there's Blink out for Trap, so he can poke and prod a little bit here. But no, we're seeing a good job get done by FanTaSy, just keeping things safe. He does have to stay back for a while now. Stimpak takes a while to research, and it still takes a while to research, guys. As those of you unaware, there's possibly a patch coming down the line. I think it was like August 20th or something. And what that's going to do is just absolutely make all the other races just hate their life, because stim timings, they're going to be 20 seconds faster, something like that, because the stim actual research time was reduced 20 seconds. So we'll see how that actually is going to work, but basically what that's going to do is allow the Terran to maybe move out a little bit earlier. Right now, FanTaSy is very, very pinned by the Protoss player. Trap just being a bit of a pain with his Stalkers. Once Stim's out, it allows the Terran to more easily pursue. Something that was definitely noteworthy here, though, is the fact that it's not actually Colossus. It's a very quick High Templar with the Psystorm on the way from Trap. So just going right into this Charge Lot Templar, maybe Archon style, that's a very interesting development here for the Protoss, just deciding to go for this. Psystorm is, I'm going to say it, the most powerful spell in the game. Just its AoE is incredibly strong, and oh, look at this. We're actually seeing Trap maybe looking for a dirty Psystorm here. As that is just cheeky. FanTaSy, though, going for a double drop. But the thing about Psystorm is, while I'll say it again, it being the most powerful spell in the game, it generally does need something to follow it up, in a sense. Like, that's why you generally want, say, 1 or 2 Colossus and then Psystorm, because just, like, the Psystorm just bruises everything, then the Colossus melts it. So we'll see what Trap is going to bring just to really consolidate his army. For now, though, he's going for some real fancy stuff, though. He's going to be trying to shut down this drop that's coming his way back at home. Doesn't really have a lot to make that happen, though. The Stalkers are blinking on in. They're not going to be there in time, though, so these units are going to unload. All the while, though, Trappy's got this Prism, but it's not doing anything. It looks like there may be a bit of Liberator harassment, or there was Raven harassment here at the natural. So Trap taking a bit of a beating here. Nothing too major. FanTaSy actually throwing down another auto turret. Looks like he was trying to pick off a couple of probes here. Doesn't really get too much done with that. Denied a fair bit of mining time. Does end up getting cleaned up, though. But oh, look at this. This Prism's actually going to be found here by another drop of FanTaSy. So the sort of ICU, you see me situation going on right now. And FanTaSy should be reacting accordingly. He's got tanks back at home. The concern, though, is the fact that it could just potentially be at some point, oh man, oh no, Trap, oh, he's in trouble here. He just lost his Prism that was full. I was talking about all that he was going to do with it, when in reality, all that it did was die. Trap taking a bit of, or having a bit of a rough go at it. I mean, FanTaSy being a pain with his harassment here, just trying to keep the pressure on his opponent. Even just one Marine just charging on in there like Rambo, just trying to pick off any probes that he can. And FanTaSy just looking good this game. I mean, he's up on supply. He's got a third base that's floating on over. And he's actually got an upgrade lead for a short period of time, but then will regain that going forward. So things aren't looking too bad for the Terran right now. Of course, there is Psystorm out, which you got to be very, very respectful of as FanTaSy. But look at this. Even this Raven is just hanging out. Maybe we're going to go for some cheeky auto turrets again in a little bit here. Looks like we're seeing a bit of an engagement down on the center of the map there. I missed a little bit of that, but FanTaSy is indeed retreating. You know what, guys? We're actually going to go check that engagement. Let's just see exactly what happens here. I don't like to miss sort of super notable things like that here. So it's like FanTaSy just moving on in with his army. And then in goes Trap. Yeah, I'm just wondering if any Psystorms or anything were dropped, because, I mean, yeah, that's really what I'm wondering about, whether FanTaSy tried to pick anything off. Yeah, FanTaSy at the top of the ramp. Does he eat a Psystorm? No, he doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't look like he does. He just ends up retreating. So just a small engagement there. And then everything considered, though, this is looking all right for FanTaSy. Terrans are really ramping up this tank production that they've been going for, as they're realizing that the tanks require a definitive answer for Protoss. Just a few Immortals don't shut down unlimited siege tanks anymore, so it allows the Terran a bit of a different positional advantage, and can really force the Protoss's hand and negates a lot of the advantages that Protoss have, like High Templar and other things like that. So not looking too bad here for the Terran, but you still got to be careful. Oh, look at this. Oh, man. Trap almost losing another Warp Prism. He already lost one, and yeah, oh, okay, he does decide to recall. Looks like this Raven dropped another turret. High Templar goes in and feedbacks it though. Ouch, that hurt for the Raven. Had like 100 energy there. Fortunately for the Raven, that nerf had gone through, so it didn't just explode instantly. Taking a look at this though, in goes FanTaSy. Trap out of position. This Nexus he just threw up, that is going to be cancelled right away. Now he's got to pull back to try and deal with that, but his third base is actually exposed, but he does have a couple of High Templar in those Prism to deal with it, so actually shutting that down incredibly well with this Psystorm. A couple of High Templar might get picked off, but FanTaSy's army, his bio just got shreked there. Very well done. Now, FanTaSy is going to try and keep this going, just get as much mileage out of these units as he can. But it's looking like this army is going to be getting cleaned up pretty darn well here. So good value on the Psystorm there. A couple of units do escape, and when I say a couple, I mean 5 in total. 4 Marauders and a Marine. FanTaSy, while this is going on though, getting up a 4th base. We take a look at the production. It looks pretty decent for the Terran. Protoss player is starting as 2/2 upgrades, whereas FanTaSy just has his +2 attack going. So that is notable so far. We'll see if FanTaSy does start that armor upgrade. Meanwhile, Trap just looking to get up that 4th base, but oh, this drop going off towards the natural of Trap, so a very good job by FanTaSy here, just keeping this harassment going non-stop. Trap, I mean, he's not really doing anything super wrong, but FanTaSy is definitely getting his moves in. An Observer does spot this army to the right, though, so that is good for the Protoss player to know what's coming his way. Archon just hanging out here. Is this Archon stuck? It shouldn't be stuck, right? Anyway, as this game goes on, FanTaSy just poking, testing, but a very good observer placement here for Trap. Sees that army to the right, so knowing is pretty much half the battle, or it might even be more than half the battle for Protoss. It's all about that defensive game, really, if you're playing the style like Trap is. Trap is going right for Tempest, once again, a little bit risky, I feel, as he's relying entirely on his High Templar for his AoE. Of course, someone like Trap does have very good control with units like this, but in goes this bio for FanTaSy, once again, going to be looking to snuff out this Nexus, and I think he's going to be able to get it, so that's got to be a cancel right for Trap. Yeah, that hurts. FanTaSy is already on 4 bases here, getting a planetary setup. When he just denied the 4th base of Trap, once again, he's just going to try and get on out of there. Minimal commitment here for FanTaSy. All right, let's see. A Thor even on the way for FanTaSy. Just feeling like a baller that he's going to add on a Thor right out the gate. Well, not really right out the gate, but just 12 minutes into the game, he's like, yeah, you know, I could go for a Thor. And we actually saw this in the last TvP that I cast. I want to say, or definitely was one of the ones that I cast recently. I think it was Tasia DNS. Tasia added on some Thors, so might be a Korean Terran thing to start seeing this. Oh, beautiful Psystorm up that hill. Fantastically done. That is Trap's control right there. Just shredded a ton of bio. The Marauders get out just barely, but the Marines not looking so good. We're now seeing Trap throws down a Nexus on the bottom right because he's just having a tough time securing any bases. Gotta really leave a High Templar or 2 at each base, prevent those small groups of bio going on in. And for those of you that watched my last video, we're seeing Trap, he's actually double expanding here. I love this choice. If he had maybe squeezed out a double expansion a minute or 2 earlier even, and he probably could have afforded it, then he might have had a 4th mining base going on right now. Auto turrets go on in though. Looks like this Raven just getting its damage on in still. The Tempest might want to try and hunt down that Raven. For now though, we are just seeing FanTaSy just throw whatever he can at Trap, and it is going well for the Terran. That big distracting ship is still just hanging out. Speaking of ships, there's a lot of Tempest out here for Trap, but the thing is, FanTaSy is not really playing the Liberator game. He just doesn't care about it. Yeah, he's actually just skipping the Liberator game, and I don't really know what to say. Look at this. FanTaSy dropping in towards the natural base of Trap. Now, he's going to be denying +3 armor from the seam of it. Getting that done. Just going to load on up into his Medivacs and actually dukes out those Stalkers there. Yeah, just juking out those Stalkers, and let's take a look. FanTaSy just getting so much done when really, I mean, Trap, he's just been playing the defensive game, but FanTaSy's just been all over the place, looking really good here in this match. The Tempest, I mean, they're not even really doing too much. The Tempest's main point in Starcraft 2 in PvT, really, it's to deny Liberators. That's really their main goal, and FanTaSy has not made a single Liberator here. He's just gone right into Thors to counter those Tempest. just to add that muscle into his army. We're seeing a few disruptors out here for Trap, which is something I like to see. Thors, Ghosts, and Siege Tanks, not the best versus disruptors because they're not the most agile units. Look at this. Cyclone moves up towards the north here. Trap just trying to continuously secure more and more expansions despite having a few delayed or denied. And that's actually a very good move here for Trap because we look at it, and while yes, he's sort of been getting jerked back and forth a little bit this game, I mean, at the end of the day, if he just consolidates on all of his bases, he can be fine. He can just walk it off. It doesn't matter how well FanTaSy did early on, as long as you reach sort of the end point. And that's what Trap's looking for right now. So we've seen FanTaSy hit Trap all over, but Trap still, he's maxed out. He's getting up more and more bases. So any of that damage he took early on really is just is a moot point at this point in the game. So let's take a look at it. FanTaSy going in with another beautiful drop here, going to shut down another Nexus. He's sniping these things left and right, and he's actually moving towards to pick off the North Nexus. Oh, he actually pulls back some of the bio, though. That's because there's a big engagement going on here at the front. Trapness rallies part of his army, eats some EMPs from the seam of things, and so a great engagement there for FanTaSy. Probably going to go back up and pick off that Nexus. Gets another one. He's going to pick off the Robotic Spade just because he can. Picks off a few High Templar, forces an Archon Morph. And this game is just looking great for FanTaSy right now. Playing an absolutely insane Terran versus Protoss right now. We're seeing more disruptors on the way for Trap. His standing army is still pretty good with the Tempest and Templar, and then adding a few disruptors in there. But, I mean, FanTaSy is knocking Trap down. He's on 4 bases right now. And look at this. There is a nuke from the high ground going on to the last mining base of Trap really here. And I say the last mining base because his 3rd base is mining out. His natural is having a tough go at it. This Ghost does get the nuke off. I mean, it doesn't kill any probes or anything, but that just really hurt the mining there of Trap. Like, look at that. It's just so good for FanTaSy here. And speaking of FanTaSy, he's just securing more and more bases. He's getting up all the bases. He's doing well. He's starting to queue out more and more nukes here and invest in more and more command centers. He's spending that bank. This is what I love to see here. And just the fact that he's got so many Thors and things in his army is absolutely amazing. Although I don't know how I feel about Thors on Turbo Cruise. Just look at how slow these guys are going through that. Oh man, they are slow. A nuke getting queued on up here for FanTaSy, and we're going to try and catch all of these. Probes do actually see that Ghost, so that Ghost might have to turn and fight there. It's running. It looks like it's going to queue up a nuke in another spot, but it's actually being chased here by these probes, and the Ghost's on hold position, so it won't actually defend itself. So a sad day for that Ghost. Right now we are seeing Trap move on in. He's going to try and bully his opponent. Thors are using their insanely long anti-air range, though, to push the Tempest back. And the only thing that can really punish them is the disruptors, and we very well could see some great disruptor hits knock off these Thors. But Trap's got to really start working away on that. We are seeing disruptors on the high ground. Maybe going to try and get a Nova or 2 out. 2 Novas going out, going to pick off a tank. Not even as it stays alive. We're seeing Trap engaging partly with his army. The other half of his army, or the disruptors, which are a big component, are out of position. Looking at this though, these time warp zones are really actually messing. The inhibitor zones, pardon me, are actually really messing with FanTaSy. His Thors are just so slow. Trap is moving on in here, going to attack this base. It's not getting repaired at all, so that's going to go down. The disruptors actually get caught out a little bit here, running through those inhibitor zones. Once again, those coming into play. They're starting to really punish Trap here. They punished FanTaSy a bit. They're returning the favor. And so Trap loses pretty much all of his disruptors. They're going to lose a few High Templar to a bad rally and could potentially lose more units to a bad rally. So FanTaSy lost a base, but Trap, I mean, he lost all of his disruptors there, really. And FanTaSy just has so many command centers that he should be able to keep this going. Moving in with some of his bio now, going to start hitting, knocking off these cannons, doing whatever he can. Disruptor and a couple of DTs are there, though, so this part of the army should be pushed back. Right now, it really is just Thors and siege tanks here for FanTaSy, and that seems to be doing the right job. I mean, yeah, nothing too bad for that. I mean, the tanks really zone out everything on the ground, and the Thors just annihilate the Tempest. FanTaSy is trying to re-secure this base. I'd love to see him float over another. There we go. He's floating over command center there. Hell, even throwing up there, you got 3K bank, FanTaSy. You want to keep this gravy train rolling. For now, though, Trap has been doing a pretty good job keeping the pressure on his opponent and by proxy defending himself, because FanTaSy's been so busy reacting to what Trap's been throwing at him. Looks like we're seeing a bit of an engagement down here. An EMP goes down, hits a ton of Zealots, but that is exactly that, a ton of Zealots. So I don't know what those guys are going to be able to get done. Looks like a bit more harassment going in for FanTaSy. I mean, just going to try and knock off another Nexus. Looks like this army will be intercepted, though, so these Marauders and Marines not going to make that dream happen. And Trap, I mean, he's keeping this game going. I mean, he's secured these 2 fresh bases, even this one to the north as well, so his economy should really be bouncing back here, and it is. He's got the income lead for now. FanTaSy's had a tough time securing new bases. He probably hasn't been dropping as many mules as he'd like, burning lots of scans and things. But, I mean, still, as far as this game goes, pretty darn equal. Trap has stabilized, though, and so he does have that late game going for him. But, oh, look at this. Even 2 Thors are just going to march on in towards this Nexus and just right-click on it. We're seeing Trap wants to engage on in here. Can't really push into the tanks, though, so a really cool composition coming out of FanTaSy right now. If I'm FanTaSy right now, I feel like some Liberator harassment or something would be great at this point. Even, yeah, I don't know, because it's mainly just like Zealots and DTs defending, right? Like 1 or 2 Liberators harassing would be good. Of course, that's very tough to do, very tough to multitask. We're seeing FanTaSy throw up 4 command centers. I love that choice. Just keep that good economy going. Looks like he may be losing another base here unless he can get here in time to defend it. Novas have to be dodged here. Psystorm going down. Doesn't do too much to Thors, though. And oh, look at this. Okay, Trap has had enough. 5 more gateways, 3 Immortals at a time on the way for Trap. He's thinking a ton of Zealots and Immortals maybe just to try and shut down this army. Poor Ghost, you're gonna have a bad time. FanTaSy not having really any successful nukes. But man, the Immortals being produced is gonna be pretty scary for FanTaSy. We will have to see though. Look at this. Even these SCVs, they're gonna have a bad day. Psystorm dropping down. Looks like Trap gonna be knocking off one of FanTaSy's bases here. FanTaSy though looking at going for a nasty push right now. And I was saying, I mean, these Immortals, they might be very helpful here, but Immortals aren't even that good versus siege tanks these days since they don't have that hardened shield. They've got that extra health, and I mean, they're good, but they're not ridiculously broken like they used to be in the past. So, I mean, Immortals are not just a complete shutdown for siege tanks like they used to be. We'll see how these 3 guys are going to fare. Probably not that well since they're just dawdling forward. We're heading into a bit of a base trade or just a bit of an awkward engagement here right now as Trap is stepping forward. FanTaSy's trying to make it through the inhibitor zones there. Landed some pretty darn good EMPs, getting snipes off on critical High Templar there, and they all fall as a matter of fact. So this is looking pretty good for FanTaSy, but keep in mind both players have bases. They both have banks too. So, I mean, this game could just keep going on and on here. So many units have died. So many engagements going on this game. Let's take a look here, though. I mean, the army for FanTaSy is just Thors and Bio here. It's a really interesting composition. Looks like we are seeing Trap move on in. FanTaSy's a little bottled up right now, and there's a ton of disruptors, so he's got to be careful. He doesn't really have many siege tanks out right now in order to try and deal with those disruptors. He's rebuilding some more. But it could really be on his bio to close the gap here. And, I mean, if he does get a good bio engage... Oh, look at these Immortals, by the way. Just trying to knock off some of those tanks and that planetary there. But, I mean, it really is going to be on a good bio engagement here for FanTaSy. His army definitely has more power as long as there's no massive Psystorms or Disruptor connections. But, of course, they change everything. So, we'll see how that's going to work out. Oh, okay, this was actually what I was wondering. Is FanTaSy going to start loading up Thors into Medivacs and drop them on the army? Looks like a few Marines going to start harassing this base here. Don't know if they'll be able to work through that Nexus HP there. Meanwhile, there's continuous engagements going on. Man, this is such an insane Terran versus Protoss right now. These Marines going to pick off that Zealot, but nothing to see that DT. Another DT and some more Zealots moving on in. So what a crazy game we've got going on right now. Looks like FanTaSy's got some units to the south here. Might want to move in and try and pick off that Nexus. No, they're going to be busy responding to this army that's moving on in. Meanwhile, another bio harassment, another nuke being queued on up here. So far, pretty much none of the nukes have landed, and it looks like that was another failed nuke there. Meanwhile, there's an engagement going on. This bio down to the south is really caught here. Great force field by Trap, picking off those units, just getting every little thing that he can. And FanTaSy gonna have to replace those units. He's getting more ghosts. I don't even really know what you make as FanTaSy or Trap at this point. They've just got such odd compositions. I feel like as far as perfect play goes, then it might go Trap's way, but this has been a scrappy game just because Disruptors and High Templar are pretty darn good, right? And the Thors are so slow at dodging them, so we'll see if Trap can get off some nasty Disruptor connections. FanTaSy just got to be a little bit careful here, pushing on in, but pushing on in he is. He's going to be looking to deny this base. Trap has been so continuous with all of his expansions and even his own counterattacks. These guys have just been back and forth here, just all across the board. Trap's economy, though, does look like it's starting to run out of gas a little bit. I mean, that being said, though, he's really hurting FanTaSy's economy still. So let's take a look here. A nuke getting queued on up towards the center here. Could this be the one that lands? We'll have to wait and find out. Attacks going on everywhere. There's a counter attack. Probes are getting pulled, though, away from that Nexus. So no, Trap reacting perfectly to these nukes still. FanTaSy has to come on down, try and catch these Immortals, and catching these Immortals could actually be huge. Those are not cheap units. EMPs go down. Trap tries to recall to save them, but oh, he saves one of them. Some Zealots could be getting picked off, though. FanTaSy's economy, though, also gonna start to dry out a little bit. Not a ton of mining bases left for either of these players, so we do need to see FanTaSy try and secure another Nexus. Trap's been so continuous just keeping these on. You can't really sleep on your economy, though, if you're something like FanTaSy. You gotta keep that going. Look at this, though. Oh my god, even a nuke going in for this bout of harassment. An engagement going on down towards the south. One of these bases gets picked off for FanTaSy, and that was the main one, but these guys are just engaging each other non-stop. Looks like this Nexus probably going to go down, seeing as how there's siege tanks and nukes landing on it. But Trap, he's really knocked down the base count of FanTaSy. He's sort of being pushed back a little bit right now. His Thors are wandering around, really wondering what to do. And the income of FanTaSy is pretty much not there, so he doesn't have money to replace his army. He's got a pretty good army, all things considered. But Trap has also kept things going for himself pretty well, but as I say that, I mean, he's got the one mining base, he's getting nuked on another. Oh my god, another ghost dies. FanTaSy just has not been having a good time with these nukes. Look at this, though. Could be a potential big mistake here. FanTaSy is out on the map with a big chunk of his army. Thors and tanks are going to go down for a relatively good trade there for Trap. Actually, a pretty darn good trade. I mean, the Thors put up one heck of a fight, but oh, look at that. FanTaSy trying to move through these inhibitor zones, eating a lot of Psy Storms there. The Thors can tank a fair few, but this could be the big engagement going down right now. Disruption, though, is going down on both fronts. Who's going to come out on top? I'm not sure. A lot of Immortals are in the mix here, but looks like FanTaSy is being pushed back by Trap. He's going to try and lift up anything that he can. Bio is retreating, but there's just really no production here for FanTaSy. Does he have mules dropped anywhere? I mean, not really, so his income isn't that great. He just secured another base, but the army of Trap, I feel, is just too big at this point. FanTaSy didn't really keep the ball rolling. Trap's counterattacks were just enough, whereas FanTaSy never really got a definitive blow, and since Trap was just so good at absorbing those losses and has just been playing so well. So a fantastic TvP here. I don't know if it's exactly over, but with 10 Stalkers warping in for Trap, spending that bank, I feel as if it is. FanTaSy's repairing his Thors and whatnot, but I mean, Thors, they're not that great. Disruptors, pretty darn good versus them, and all these Immortals on the ground as well. This is just a bad time here for the Terran players, moving in, trying to pick up those Disruptors, doing a decent job, but some Novas will land, and at the end of the day, there just isn't even enough Terran here. So many Immortals out for Trap, and he's done what he needed to do. A few Marines out at a time for FanTaSy, but no, yeah. A beautiful game. Look at this, FanTaSy dropping all these mules, but I feel like it was a little bit too late here. If he had, say, just floated over a command center randomly earlier in the game and done that, might have had enough money to max out and keep it going, but in the end, just beautiful play by Trap. He was getting it given to him that entire game from the seam of things, and then he just kept it together, just like he lost a lot of bases there. And I mean, he defended the harassment pretty decently, didn't eat any nukes or anything like that, but no, really just defending the bases, and basically, like, he lost a base, he lost a ton of bases this game, but he always replaced them, and a lot of players won't do that to an adequate degree, and as a result, then they'll run out of gas, and we saw FanTaSy, he had a bigger bank earlier on in the game, and then he just didn't keep that economy going. He was like, okay, yeah, he just lost bases here and there, whereas you really need to put an effort in to keep that going. So beautifully played here by Trap. FanTaSy, I mean, all of his harassment and everything was amazing. But enough of me rambling on here, guys. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like button. This was an insane TvP, Trap versus FanTaSy. If you enjoyed it, hit that like button. If you're new to the channel and enjoy my commentary, I really focus on the games and all that, and I do commentate a fair bit on this channel. Generally try and cover games that most people might not have seen, But really, whatever is good. So if you're new to the channel and you enjoy it, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Otherwise, I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.